Hi, I'm Kim Parley, and I'm joined by Jacquie Lovelock, Principal of Family Governance, and Elise Pulver, Principal Wealth and Tax Planning from TD Wealth Family Office, to talk about passing your wealth to the next generation and the importance of considering the practical and emotional aspects of succession. It is great to have you both here. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Kim.
I want to start, Elise, with you. And I imagine many people do write a will when they're dealing with substantial wealth, and sometimes will make the choice to not involve their children in the planning because it's uncomfortable. But we're going to talk a lot about how that can have unintended consequences when people pass. I want to start by asking you if you can explain how not involving your kids in this planning can lead to unexpected issues.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely one of these hot button topics where we learn that parents want to do estate planning. They have the best intentions. They have a clear vision of how they want to distribute their wealth, but they don't involve their children. In these situations, they go to their lawyer and they give their lawyer their instructions, how they want to distribute their wealth. The unintended consequences will happen when they haven't involved their children in the process.
What would be some of those unintended consequences? I mean, not to get too into the weeds here, but just maybe give us an example of how this might play out.
Well, when you don't involve the children, they could be surprised. They might not know that the family has the wealth that they have accumulated over the years.
Yeah.
They might have expected something that they're not going to get. They might feel that they've been treated unfairly. So when you're not part of the process and you only really read the will after your parents die, you don't have a chance to ask your parents why they made the decisions that they made.
Right, so someone gets one property, somebody gets someone else, they think it's not equal, they don't understand why, the conflict ensues.
Exactly.
Let me ask you, what would you say are some of the reasons parents choose not to involve their kids in this process?
There are a lot of reasons. So one is that it's a sensitive subject. They just don't want to talk about it. Other families are just extremely private. It's personal to them. They keep it close to their heart. And when the time comes, their children will find out. Often thinking that they don't want the conflict during their lifetime. They want to keep it all to themselves, not realizing the conflict that will, that they're just passing to the next generation potentially. And other families just want to ensure their children are motivated to work. So they don't tell their children what they're going to receive so that the children pursue post-secondary education and get a job.
Yeah, be successful on their own and not wait for something to happen later on. Jacquie, I'd love to bring you in the conversation. What do you recommend when you are engaging clients in this conversation? I mean, part of this is, I know we were talking earlier, they need to know the purpose of what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. So what's the purpose of the wealth? They've accumulated all this money, or they've received all this money, and what is it that they want for their kids when they're gone? And that really is the crux of the conversation starter. What do they envision their kids' lives to be like 5 or 10 years after they're gone? And then we take a look at how their values that they've lived their life, how did that play into the children receiving the inheritance, right? And then from there we take a look at, do you want your kids to inherit the money, or do you want them to be stewards of the money? And often there's a discussion around what the difference is and how that will impact their kids and their wealth. So once the parents have decided which route they want to go, then it just makes the whole process easier for them to start with the end in mind and then help the experts help them devise a plan to get there.
Let's start then again about some of the key differences in what you just mentioned between inheriting and being stewards. And I think people, just from the nature of what I'm saying, they'll understand the definition, but maybe you could tease it out for us.
Sure. So if you decide that you want your kids to inherit your wealth, they get the wealth, they can do with it whatever they'd like.
Yeah.
There's no strings attached, there's no expectations from the parents. They can spend it, save it, whatever they'd like to do. If you want your kids to steward the wealth, it's a different mind shift. The money is no longer mine if I'm receiving it. It's wealth that's for future generations, and my job is to be a steward of that wealth, to invest it responsibly, to take a responsible amount of money out to supplement my own lifestyle. But really, my job is to build that wealth for future generations and to teach my children the legacy that came from my parents and the values that came with it as well.
Yeah, that would be a surprise to people, I'm sure, if they thought they were expecting to inherit it and they find out they're stewards. And so even, I think, imagine at the early process, it's just even communicating that much to the children ahead of time to let them know what they'll be expecting is important.
It is. And I think, to Elise's point, sometimes parents are reluctant to talk about their assets with their kids because depending on the age and the stage of the kids and maybe just what the kids are like.
Yeah.
They may not want to say, this is the dollar amount that we have to inherit. And you don't have to do that. You can still talk to your kids about what your intention is without disclosing dollar amounts.
Yeah.
And the dollar amounts may be very different today than they are when the parent passes away. So that's another reason not to necessarily talk about the dollar amounts. But I think it's really important to let your kids know what the intentions are so that they're not surprised when you're gone and you're not around to ask.
Yeah. That's a great point. Elise, I want to bring it back to you. When you think about the two, broad categories, inheriting or stewardship, maybe just explain kind of the different ways the planning process has to happen to support those two.
Well, they're really different because if you're leaving an inheritance to children, it's an outright gift, very simple planning. Whereas if you have a legacy, a lot more goes into that decision and the drafting. So you have trusts, you have governance, you have decisions about who will manage the money, and you also need to prepare that next generation to protect and grow the capital. So a lot more goes into the stewardship side of planning.
And when you say prepare too, I mean, part of this, and I know we'll get into this in a bit, but this is like the skills, the way to think about this, the way to be a proper steward. It's not something that just, you're declared. You actually have to do the work to get ready to be able to do these kinds of things.
Right, so we say you really need to have a vision as a family on how you want that legacy passed down, and you can't just put that on the children. The children need to be part of the discussions. What are the family values? How do we want to see this legacy passed down generation to generation? And that's a lot of the work that Jacquie does in our office, preparing the family for the money.
Well, let's build on that then. And this is an emotional process, and I'm sure it's emotional for everybody involved, parents and children. How do you facilitate that process to start the conversation and to build the muscle, for lack of a better word, to actually make these things come to life?
It is a very defined process that we go through. So it starts with me talking with the parents to find out what their vision is, what their values are, and again, as I mentioned earlier, what the purpose is for the wealth. Then what I do is I have a conversation with every single one of the family members, and I have a list of questions that I ask them that are custom for that family, and we go through the questions individually. It takes about 2 hours. And then what we do afterwards is we'll meet, and I'll have gone through the questions looking for the similarities. And what I'm trying to find for the family is that North Star. This is why we're doing this, and when things get tough, this is what's going to hold us together.
So it's obviously important to work with all the family members, develop the North Star, have them feel comfortable about it. But once that North Star is agreed upon, and again, different for every family, which I'm sure that you go through, what are the next steps? I mean, how do you prepare the family to live that North Star?
Depending on the age of the next generation that's involved, we may get into some education on what's called the three-circle model, which talks about the family, the business, and the ownership. We also have a program that we work with our families, and it depends on, again, on the age and the stage. And we talk about 5 external competencies and 5 internal competencies that each age group should be looking at, whether it's from age 5 right up until age 80 or 90. And it's self-directed. So what's great about it is that it's not prescriptive. I'm not saying to you, Kim, you need to learn how to read a balance sheet.
Yeah.
You may not have any interest in doing that, but there may be other items that are on this list that are of interest to you.
Yeah.
And so you get to choose which ones that you want to learn and start this lifelong learning journey. And what we do for parents is we provide them with things that their kids should be thinking about. So as young as 5 years old, how to teach them the value of money, how to get them involved in philanthropy, which is really important to a lot of the families that we work with.
Yeah.
Some of it is how to deal with your school friends who may not have as much money as you do when you're 12 years old,
Yeah.
especially if it's new wealth.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think that's probably for a lot of people too, is that, there has been a lot of great wealth built, people working very hard and building businesses and doing things, but having it come to you suddenly can be a big life change.
Well, it changes your relationships with friends. It changes relationships with family, sometimes with family you didn't even know you had.
And then once that new wealth has been created, let's say this is a business that was created a few generations ago, also I guess teaching people how to handle, to take the reins of business and wealth as they move forward as well.
It's identifying who in your family has the skills to take on and run the business and who has the interest.
Yeah.
Not all of them will, and sometimes the ones that are interested will surprise you. So for some of them, it's learning leadership skills and decision making. The other thing the family has to decide is if somebody wants to work in the family, what are the rules of engagement? Do you have to work at another business first? before you come and work in the family office to get outside experience? Do you need to have a university degree? How is salary going to be determined? Who's going to do the performance reviews? And how is the addition of a family member going to be received by the other people in the firm?
Well, it's become clear to me there's a lot of expertise that is needed in terms of navigating these conversations and the journey. And it's also clear to me this is more holistic. This is not just a legal conversation.
Exactly. So you really need a team in place that can help you and broaden the perspectives at the table. So where you have the parents that have one idea, bring others to the table, bring other advisors, bring the children, just make it, a family affair so you ensure those unintended consequences do not happen.
Well, Elise and Jacquie, such a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.